Welcome to American Medicine Today. I'm Kimberly Bonati alongside Ethan Youker and world-renowned orthopedic surgeon Dr. Alfred Bonati. We have an exciting show lined up for you. Let's get right to it. So a new book by world-renowned neuroscientist who pioneered research on sugar addiction is hoping to help readers kick their unhealthy habit for good. Joining us to discuss is Dr. Nicole Avena, author of Sugarless. Thank you for coming on the program.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Certainly. Now, Dr. Avena, we all know Americans consume way too much sugar, but can you actually detail the detrimental effects sugar has, both on the body and the brain?
You know, we're just starting to uncover all the damaging things that sugar can do. We used to think about sugar as being linked to obesity and heart disease, but now we're seeing that it's linked to a host of a variety of different physical and also mental health conditions. And so sugar's been linked to certain forms of cancer. Too much sugar intake has also been linked, of course, to diabetes. And we're also now learning that it can affect our mood. And a lot of times when people are struggling with mental health issues, one of the things that can often really help is modifying their diet in a way that reduces the added sugar. And a lot of people find that that can really be helpful for not only boosting their mood, but also just their wellness in general.
People say, including yourself, say that sugar is highly addictive, as much so as cocaine or heroin or alcohol or nicotine or any of that. But I mean, how are we supposed to avoid it when it's literally everywhere? You buy a loaf of white bread, there's sugar in it. I mean, there's sugar in everything. How do we avoid it?
I know. It's tough. And I think this is really the public health issue that we're struggling with right now, is the fact that sugar is so pervasive in our food environment. And like you said, we've been doing a lot of research in my lab, looking at how it can actually promote an addiction, how it can cause changes in the brain that are like what happens when someone gets addicted to things like drugs or alcohol. And so what I tell people in my new book, Sugarless, is really trying to focus in on educating yourself about where the sugars are. I think that's one of the big pieces of the puzzle, is knowing where the hidden sugars are. And it can be a challenge because there's actually over 200 different names that can be used in the foods that we eat for added sugar.
You say sugarless, but let's be real. As you go shopping, they say no calorie or sugar-free. Then you turn the little cans or bottles over and it talks about aspartame or Equal or Splenda. That's equally as bad, if not worse.
Yeah, we've heard that it's even worse than sugar. What say you, Dr. Avena?
Yeah, I think that really it's about reducing our dependence on sweeteners in general. A lot of these artificial sweeteners and these other more naturally marketed sweeteners that are available claim that they're better or healthier because they don't have calories. But the reality is that for many people, that's not going to help fix their addiction. They're still going to be hooked on that sweet taste. So I recommend trying to use those sparingly. If you need to use them as a crutch to get yourself off of the real sugar, then maybe that's okay. But the goal at the end should be to reduce our dependence on sweeteners in general.
Well, and I guess your book reveals what's called a straightforward 7-step program to identify hidden sugars. Because as Kimberly mentioned, a lot of times it's the word, you don't just look at the package and it says sugar is the first thing. They have some technical scientific name for it. So what are some of these 7 steps to identify hidden sugars and break the cycle of cravings? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I really wanted to make sure that this book was very user-friendly. So I talk a lot about the science. I talk a lot about how sugar affects our health, but I also wanted to give people a realistic plan of how they can actually get it out of their diet and overcome this, because that's where I think a lot of people struggle. We all know that sugar is not good for us and we're having too much, but what can we do? So one of the first things I recommend is, again, starting with your beverages. A lot of times beverages have hidden sugars in them. So reevaluating your morning coffee routine, if that involves creamers and sweeteners, really think about how you can reduce, not eliminate at first, but really just bringing that down to be less. And then from there, another step is around the whole concept of cravings. A lot of times people struggle when they're changing their diet because they deal with those intense cravings. And so I talk a lot about the difference between an actual craving, which is dependent on us needing calories or having a nutrient deficiency, which is pretty rare these days, versus a hedonic craving, which is the craving that most people typically struggle with, which is just a craving for the pleasure that you get from those types of foods that we know are delicious. And so if you walk past your favorite pastry shop and you suddenly just are dying for a pastry, that's a hedonic craving. So working through those and understanding how you can recognize them and avoid them is really an important part of the process.
I went a little cold turkey when it came to sugars, and then pretty soon I didn't crave it anymore. And I struggle with my husband who loves his sweeteners. And I said, if you can just train almost your taste buds to not want it anymore, when you have it, it's almost sickening.
It's very true. And a lot of people will say this, that when they haven't been consuming so much of the added sugar, when they taste something, it's almost aversive. It's not pleasurable.
Correct.
And that has to do with the addiction piece of tolerance. We've actually can become tolerant to the sweet taste. And so that's why a lot of times people need more and more and more sugar added to their products, because it doesn't really taste that sweet to them. They need to keep adding more. So when you do work to reduce it or cut it out, you'll be amazed by how disgustingly sweet, if that makes sense, a lot of the food products are that are out there.
Modern Americans, i.e. all of us, we taste fruit the way it's supposed to be. And because we're so over-saccharinated that it tastes sour when it's really not, right?
Absolutely. It's called negative contrast in psychology. And that's because we taste stuff that is so sweet all the time, then when we taste something that is naturally sweet, it doesn't even taste sweet to us. And so I think that when people start to phase the sugar out, you really do start to notice the natural sweetness again. So strawberries start to taste sweet. Another thing that starts to taste sweet, believe it or not, is carrots. Carrots, especially when you roast them, they are pretty sweet. But most people don't think that or talk about that because we're so used to having sugar in the form of cakes and cookies and, things like that.
There's a quiz in your book that evaluates your level of sugar addiction. Can you throw a couple questions at Kimberly and I so we can kind of get an idea where we rate?
Yeah, so the quiz is great because it helps you to see where you kind of fall on this spectrum of sugar addiction. And so it asks questions like, do you feel that you spend an exorbitant amount of time thinking about food or planning when you're going to eat your next meal? Or do you experience cravings if you go for a certain amount of time without having access to sugar? Or when you give up sugar, do you feel signs of withdrawal or lethargy or, not really feeling all that great? Things like that are really about addiction and dependence on drugs and alcohol, but they're tweaked to be about food because we're learning it's very much the same systems.
Yeah, you feel a little pain when you try to come off all of it, but you know what? In the end, you feel so much better and much more energized because we all know with sugar, then you have the drop off and that is killer.
The crash.
Yeah. Well, we certainly appreciate you for being on the program. Thank you so much, Dr. Nicole Avena, for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
Make sure you stay tuned. We'll have more after the break.
2 neurosurgeons couldn't figure out anything that was wrong with me or what I would need surgery for. Dr. Bonati, without even seeing me, knew I was hurting, knew they could help me. First time I came in here was Monday, and today is Thursday. I've had 2 surgeries and am doing fantastic. I'm still in shock that I can walk. That's all within 4 days.
Visit AskBonati.com. Charles is a hardworking man from Pennsylvania.
I'm a family-based therapist. I travel to homes of troubled youth and families and help them work through their issues. My favorite thing to do is ride my Harley. So I love riding. My wife likes to ride with me as well. And we spend a good bit of time doing that. I was a coach for a lot of years, so I'll go watch hockey games or football games. I don't even have to know the kids. It's good to see healthy kids playing healthy games because my job is working with kids that aren't healthy. So I enjoy doing that with a couple buddies of mine that I coached with through the years.
While Charles works as a therapist now, he previously spent time working in the coal mines, where his job required him to lift and operate heavy equipment. As the years wore on, it began to take a toll on him physically, until one day he injured his back while working around his home.
We built a new house and we were putting a retaining wall in. I was a busy guy at that time. I was actually talking on my phone. I had my phone stuck to my ear like this, and I was lifting up 90-pound landscape blocks, and I just felt a really nasty pop. It kind of put me on the ground real quick. I was down for a couple minutes and I got back up and kept doing it. Always had pain when I was walking, nothing that I couldn't handle because I'd been through so much pain my whole life. I just let it go.
Charles was able to push through the pain, but eventually had to seek medical attention. His hometown doctors advised him to undergo traditional open back surgery.
I had my first surgery in which they did two, I think they're called discectomies, and then one lumpectomy. That was about a 6-month to a year recovery.
A few years ago, Charles began experiencing weakness in his legs and a general loss of stability. Since he relied on his motorcycle to commute to work, it began impacting his ability to perform his job.
I first noticed it like in the weakness of my legs. My right knee would give out. I actually, at a stoplight or a stop sign, I went to put my feet down on my bike. My knee wouldn't hold me up, so it dropped. My legs didn't feel stable. I didn't feel balanced on the bike. I haven't been to a client's home since the beginning of December. So that's what it prevented me from doing. I couldn't go to the clients. My job has the advantage of being able to do online counseling, but anybody who knows anything about counseling, it's not the same. So I would have to do everything online or on the phone, and that's just not good for the kind of work I do.
Realizing he needed help and trying to avoid another open back surgery, Charles tried a number of conservative treatments to no avail.
Over the years, I spent a lot of time in chiropractic care. It would give me relief, and sometimes it would last longer than others. I wasn't going every week. I was a little bit concerned about, especially with chiropractic care, because they always want to twist you. The last time I went to a chiropractor, like in December, whenever it got really bad, and I woke up and I couldn't really move, and I was rolling out of bed, and all the stuff that I had dealt with in the past, I went to a chiropractor twice. He made it worse. Massage therapist, just trying to deal with it. Even did a little bit of cupping around my hips, and that gave me a lot of relief. I thought that was going to be the answer to everything, but it would last a week or so, then it would go away. And that's when I knew, and I just stopped all of it.
When conservative treatments failed, Charles began searching for alternatives to the traditional open back surgery he had in the past. And that's when he learned about the Bonati Spine Institute from his wife's uncle.
We first heard about the Bonati Institute about 2 years ago. It's her uncle, my uncle too, came down for a procedure, and he had 2 levels done. When he was talking about it, I'm like, yeah, it probably wasn't a big deal, and like there wasn't as much damage. It was a different case, And I paid very little attention to it. But her aunt came down in December, and she had been fused. And I'd watched this woman suffer with pain. I mean, she was walking with a walker or in a wheelchair. She couldn't go up steps. They had chair lifts in the house. Like it was a mess. And, he actually removed the fusion. I think it was Dr. Bonati did hers, and when I seen her come back from that, and it was right around the time I was dealing with all this, she walked into her aunt, her other aunt's house, and was sitting there with not grimacing, not complaining. It was enough to convince me to, at least send the MRI and see what he has to say.
When Charles arrived for his in-person evaluation, he was provided a physical exam, had some additional x-rays taken at the on-campus imaging center, and a few minutes later, met with the surgeon to develop and customize a surgical plan to eliminate his pain. Hearing Bonati could help, Charles scheduled the first of his procedures for that afternoon.
It was pretty cool. I came here, my appointment was at, I think, 8 or 8:30. They took me almost immediately over for x-rays, brought me back, took me into a room. Nurses are talking to me, getting vitals and all that stuff. And Dr. Bonati walks in, and he's like, you see this, this is what's causing it. We're going to remove this, and you're not going to have pressure there, and that's going to let the nerve operate as it should, and you're not going to have pain. And, so that made sense. And, within a half hour from that, I think I was on the operating table getting the first surgery done.
At the Bonati Spine Institute, surgeries are performed incrementally using conscious IV sedation, where the patient remains awake and communicating with their surgeon. This is to ensure the source of the patient's pain is eliminated before they leave the operating table.
I was a little bit worried about how I'd respond in that. It's still a little freaky feeling things get pulled and tugged and tapped and all that stuff, but I understand why they do it, because they want to make sure that the pain's not there. Lifting my leg the way I did off that table, I would have never been able to do that prior. And they had me doing like a kind of like a push up and arching my back. Again, that wouldn't have happened. So they're testing it, and I think that's smart.
Okay, go up and down. Now it's different. Now you are doing it. Perfect.
I don't have any pain when I do it.
I want that you lift yourself and do a push-up. No back pain?
No.
You got it.
Patients of the Bonati Spine Institute are often surprised by how quickly they are able to be up and moving just minutes after their procedure.
The first surgery I had on Monday, I was up and walking. And then they told me to jog, and I thought they were out of their mind. And I haven't jogged in, I don't know, since probably 2015. I didn't know how to, you don't know, you never think you're going to do that again. So, yeah, it was pretty amazing. So, and I knew at that point, I was going to have, my quality of life was going to be better.
At the Bonati Spine Institute, patients are not required to wear uncomfortable braces or suffer weeks of agonizing physical therapy post-surgery. Instead, they are instructed to walk about 40 minutes a day.
The only physical therapy they've told me here is make sure you walk as much as you can.
Charles highly recommends the Bonati Spine Institute to anyone suffering with neck or back pain.
The fact of the matter is I've already recommended Bonati Spine Institute to a coworker. So I called him last night. He's an older gentleman, and he's dealing with significant back pain. And I was trying to encourage him, just send the MRI down. That doesn't cost anything. Send it down, talk to the guy. If he says he can do something for you, listen to what he says. And if he can't, he can't. I mean, he's going to tell you. So, I would definitely recommend it to anybody.
Charles is looking forward to getting back on his motorcycle and enjoying time with family and friends.
I love coaching. I'm looking forward to grandchildren someday that hopefully will play hockey or softball or football or any of the sports that I coached, and I can be actively involved. That's a really important piece to me.
To see more stories of recovery just like this, search for the Bonati Spine Institute on YouTube, Roku, Amazon's Fire TV, Google Play Store, and Apple's App Store. Welcome back to American Medicine Today. So a new book details how the American educational system is under attack by the ideological left, who are quickly transforming our campuses into something entirely unrecognizable. Joining us to discuss is David R. Barnhizer, Professor of Law Emeritus at Cleveland State University and author of Conformity Colleges, The Destruction of Intellectual Creativity and Dissent in America's Universities. Thank you for joining us, David.
Thank you, Kimberly.
What made you want to write about the woke movement and its attempted takeover of our educational system?
Two reasons, basically. First of all, I'm a civil rights lawyer. I started out a long time ago as a social justice lawyer, representing poor people, representing minorities. If we are going to solve problems, we're not going to do it through one-sided ideology that puts anybody who doesn't agree with them down. It has to have the best minds, and that is in education. It isn't just the universities. It also includes the K through 12 system, because it's been badly influenced itself in many areas. And even if it's not influenced, it has been grossly deserved in most of our large public cities, because of the destruction, the disintegration of minority families, and inadequate education, basically, and inadequate leadership. When I first got out of Harvard Law School and went into teaching full time, I was called by people I had dealt with there and I liked, and they attempted to recruit me to something called the critical legal studies movement, which was the precursor that led to the critical race theory movement. And we went through it. I said, I'm a social justice lawyer, a civil rights lawyer. It sounds good. The words sound good. We're seeking justice. We're seeking fairness. We're seeking opportunity. We're seeking non-discrimination. We're seeking development. Those are things I care about very deeply. The reality at the end of that discussion, I said, what is it really about? And the people said, Marxism and socialism. We have never seen a Marxist or communist system that works and doesn't turn into ownership by a gang of guys running the whole thing. It's really a giant control mechanism.
This has been going on for like 30 years, right? And I mean, not
longer than that.
Okay. Well, why don't you give us some background?
It has come together and coalesced over the last 20 to 30 years. In the book, if you read, you'll see that early on there's a description of their admission that what they were doing was a war of attrition. The reality of the war of attrition is that you stealthily mobilize, build your forces, take over key elements of what your target is without your opponent knowing. And that is what they did. It took 15, 20 years from, say, 1972, 73, a movement that transitioned from a gradual incursion into the key positions of faculty and administrators in universities and became what we see today, which is a totally organized, coordinated, and strategic system that has taken over our universities, our educational system. The woke love to talk about systemic, but they have become the system.
Right. They've become what they've tried to fight against.
Exactly. Exactly.
Being on the inside as you were at Harvard and all of that, for you to push back against the other people in the ivory tower and in the Ivy League, how were you treated? I would assume kind of like a leper, although I know that can't be the case because you've had a pretty illustrious career.
Gary Bella, at a Justice Mission conference I created and staged in the early 1990s, he came out, I invited him. He was somebody I worked with in the clinical program at Harvard. He was the overall leader of it, and I and several others helped create the first real serious clinical program, which was minority representation at Harvard. And Gary came out, which was about 20 years after the first thing, the contact, and he got in the conference. He said, approvingly, "Now I see what you've been doing." So they actually don't mess with me.
You're untouchable.
I am a very nice, pleasant person until you attack me. Mm-hmm. So that really has not been a problem.
Well, we need more people like you. Now, Dr. Bonati constantly says that Republicans, talk too much, but really achieve nothing when it comes to change. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I'm not a Republican. I led most of my life as a Democrat. My family, blue-collar Democrat. I worked in steel mills during college and the like. I stopped being a Democrat, say 6-7 years ago, but I became an independent. We talked about the left having implemented a coherent, effective, and powerful strategy over time.
Right.
They had the long view. That is what they did. That's Marxist and the like. That's how they do it. Maoist, Marxist.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with David Barnhizer after this.
I think everybody was shocked, like, really? You had surgery today? I had a drain tube. I was at my desk doing payroll for 200 employees, worked till night, got up, went to bed.
Actually, the recovery was great. I mean, I really immediately felt the difference. I was able to go back to work within a couple of days.
The progress after each procedure was amazingly good. The recovery, all told, has been phenomenal.
That afternoon, when it was done, I actually felt so much better already.
6 days after surgery, I was back in the gym, slowly but surely working my way back to fighting, back to basically 100% of fighting, so 6 days, and everybody was in awe, like, didn't you just get out of surgery? I'm like, yeah, I feel great. And like, okay, let's see how you do. And I was bowling with everybody, and I'm in the advanced class. So that sounds a lot right there.
First time I came in here was Monday, and today is Thursday. I've had 2 surgeries and am doing fantastic. I'm still in shock that I can walk. That's all within 4 days.
Bonati succeeds where others fail. Welcome back to American Medicine Today. We're continuing our discussion with David R. Barnhizer.
What could we possibly do for something that I said 30 years, you said even longer, something that took that long to put into place? How can you put the
Rewind
genie
it,
back
yes.
in the bottle, right?
You have to start taking the money away. There has been a massive expansion in administrators and some faculty members, a massive expansion, multi millions of dollars being paid in fancy salaries for people who are doing this. And they're in the best job they'll ever had, but universities are in a compression period financially. The number of students going, the available number plus the cost of universities have gone up to the extent that they're cutting tuition. And that's why they're dependent on Chinese foreign students and other foreign students, because they pay full tuition. And many American students do not pay full tuition. They get significant scholarship funds because that's the only way they can do it. They can't afford it. But the thing for universities is to lower their financial base, because when they do that, they know these are frill programs. Mm-hmm. The DEI programs, plus they're divisive and they are intellectually contemptible in many ways. And that does not mean that you shouldn't talk about race. I've spent my life talking about race, and I have wonderful relationships with a whole heck of a lot of people of different ethnicities in that context, and have worked all over the world also.
Right.
And so talking about race is absolutely valid. Mm-hmm. Doing it the way they're doing it, trying to be amateur psychiatrists and psychologists, and trying to tell you they can get into your mind and help you work through all these critical issues that most of them don't exist.
Yeah.
They don't have the skills. Nobody has skills to do that.
Well, they honestly don't want any discussion between races, because we might find common ground and then they can't break that apart. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you so much for being on the program. David R. Barnhizer, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Take great care. Thank you for watching American Medicine Today, and check us out anytime, anywhere on our app. Search keyword AMT. If you have any comments or questions, contact us at the numbers below, or you can tweet at Dr. Bonati using the hashtag American Medicine Today or hashtag AMT. We would like to hear from you.